Hey there, drifting traveler of forgotten times. Tonight, your journey won't lead you into some muddy battlefield or send you coughing and gasping through a factory's choking alleyway. No, your ordeal is much quieter and honestly far more respectable. Here in Georgian London, suffering is considered almost fashionable, as long as you do it with a little dignity and preferably behind closed doors. Your decline comes with good manners and a well-tied ribbon. Illness is an accessory, and the cure, well, that arrives in a neat glass bottle, doled out with all the ceremony of afternoon tea. This is not the kind of misery that makes a scene. It's the kind that gets poured from a cut crystal vial, sweetened and served with a reassuring nod from a physician who has never once doubted his own authority. But tonight, as you lie back and listen, I promise there will be something quietly astonishing, perhaps even a little shocking, waiting for you before the end. If you find yourself enjoying the bittersweet drift of this journey, do me a favor, like and subscribe, but only if you honestly want more of this kind of boring history for sleep. And while you're at it, leave a comment telling me where in the world you're listening from and what time it is. Think of it as a little roll call of insomniacs and dreamers, all gathered for a global bedtime history. Now, dim the lights, settle in, and let yourself slip into this slow, gentle descent. This is your story, after all. Let's begin. You are 27 years old, a solicitor's wife, and, at least on paper, recently recovered from what the doctor called a difficult confinement. The child is gone. You survived, though you're not entirely sure what for. Ever since, you've been bleeding on and off. Not dramatically, just enough to make things inconvenient, to stain your best linen, to leave you wondering if you are mending or simply meandering through a new kind of frailty. Daylight makes you drowsy, but at night you lie awake and stare at the ceiling, counting out the hours and your own regrets. Sometimes you cry, though you can never quite put your finger on the reason. It comes and goes like the weather, settling in your bones, vanishing again without warning. You find yourself cold when everyone else is warm, and too warm when the rest of the house is reaching for extra blankets. There's nothing visible, no dramatic wound, no fever, nothing to point to for sympathy or even concern. Here in Georgian London, that means you have entered the most frustrating of medical states, mysterious and moderately inconvenient. The sort of woman who inspires no urgent remedies, only gentle suggestions and the occasional look of polite concern, just short of actual engagement. Your home is a tidy terrace just off Bedford Row. The street is respectable, the neighbours are unremarkable, and the shutters on your windows rattle persistently with a wind that, as far as you can tell, is unique to your address. It whistles and taps, as if determined to remind you that the world is still turning, even if you are not. You have a maid, barely 16, who brings hot bricks to your bed when you shiver. She moves quietly, never meeting your eyes, as if afraid that your troubles might be contagious. Your husband, on the other hand, manages a sort of intermittent presence. Sometimes he glances your way over the top of his newspaper at dinner, offering you a nod as if to say, "I see you're still here. That's something." He isn't unkind. There's just always something else. Court filings, retainers, The daily grind of being not just competent, but publicly competent. Once you were sharp, presentable even. You could play the harpsichord with enough flair to draw real applause from the right sort of company. You made conversation, remembered names, and wore your grief like a subtle accessory to be tucked away when guests arrived. Now, your fingers tremble when you try to button your cuffs. Letters go unfinished and stack up beside your bed. You find yourself staring at the window glass, trying to remember what you were supposed to do next. The world outside goes on, of course. People murmur things about you. It's the grief, they say, or she's delicate. What they really mean is, we wish she wouldn't. But that's not the sort of thing anyone says out loud in this part of London. Twice a week, the physician visits. He's a private sort of man, with a mild limp and a breath that always carries the faintest trace of cloves. He's developed a ritual, and you've learned it by heart. He taps your wrist, glances into your eyes, and asks, always with the same measured patience, the same 3 questions. Do you sleep through the night? Have you taken nourishment? Any thoughts of an unnatural kind? You answer as expected, not quite. Some. No. He nods, scribbles a few lines in his ledger, and instructs you, once again, to take more broth. Then he closes his book, as if that has solved something. Last week, he suggested leeches. You agreed, because really, you always agree. You have never once refused anything he has recommended. Yet, despite all this, you feel as delicate and insubstantial as a lace curtain. The pain isn't sharp, but it's always there. A dull ache low in your back, behind your ribs, or sometimes just a pressure behind your eyes that refuses to be named. You've tried to describe it. Is it ache? Is it emptiness? Is it something in between? No matter what words you try, none of them sit quite right. It isn't a pain that wounds, exactly. It's a pain that lingers, familiar as your own breathing. It follows you from one room to the next, as if determined not to be left behind. Today, the doctor skips his usual questions. He walks in, nods towards the window, and makes a comment about the wind that has never troubled anyone else. You murmur your agreement. He sits, looks you over with a practiced eye, and simply states, "You're not improving." His voice is gentle, but his face gives away nothing. "You ought to sleep more," he says. "It's your nerves, or the strain, or perhaps a failure of tone in the blood." You notice how his confidence is more of a habit than a certainty. He opens his medical satchel, uncaps a bottle of ink, and with deliberate care writes out a label with your name and the number 25. He folds the paper, seals it, and passes it to you with a brief, almost ceremonial gesture. "Laudanum," he says. "Take it sparingly. The apothecary will handle the rest." The next morning, a pale, soot-streaked boy appears at the tradesman's door behind your house. He mutters your surname, places a carefully wrapped parcel in the maid's hand, and vanishes before she can thank him. You watch this small transaction from the stairs. The boy never looks up. The parcel seems to weigh more than its contents. A small, dark brown bottle, cool against your palm. The label is written in your doctor's careful hand, Mrs. L, 25 drops. Underneath, in a finer script, it reads, "As needed." You turn it over, searching for instructions or ingredients, but there's nothing more to be found. Of course, you know laudanum. Everyone does, if only by rumour. It's talked about in the same breath as absinthe or arsenic, foreign, a little improper, and deeply fascinating. When you finally ease the stopper open, there's a faint scent of wine mixed with something metallic. You count out exactly 25 drops, watching the liquid stain your spoon before mixing it into a cup of lukewarm tea. You drink it with no ceremony, just a steady hand and a sense of mild curiosity. It tastes bitter, with a sweetness that clings to the back of your throat. You set the cup aside and wait, feeling the familiar tension begin to unwind behind your eyes. The heaviness in your chest doesn't disappear, but it seems to step back, as if moving into another room. Your arms grow warm. The pain, if you can still call it pain, softens, dissolves, blurs at the edges. You lie back almost without realizing it. The pillow is cool. The sheets smell faintly of starch and sleep. Your eyes slide closed, and for a moment everything is quiet, suspended. When you wake, hours have slipped past you. For the first time in weeks, you feel something nearly forgotten, a gentle return to yourself. The ache lingers, but it's dimmer, like a memory half remembered. The air in your room is less sharp. Your own name comes to mind without effort. The second cup of tea tastes, at last, like tea. You even manage to finish a letter you'd abandoned last week. When your husband returns home, he remarks on the improvement in your complexion. You nod, thank him, and excuse yourself to bed early. He looks relieved, as if perhaps you have finally become manageable again. You are not addicted. You are simply managing your condition. The doctor would certainly agree. But, of course, this is only the beginning. The bottle sits on your bedside table, half shrouded in shadow, waiting for you to decide just how much relief you really need. You wonder, for a brief moment, how many drops it takes before the ache is gone entirely, and whether you would even notice if it returned. You close your eyes, and the room breathes around you. And so, as the night deepens and the wind taps at your window, you settle in and wait. The next chapter begins not with a rush, but with a hesitation, because you do not take the drops immediately the next day. No, you pause, almost refusing to believe just how easy it has become to forget. But that, as you'll see, is its own kind of ritual. You wake with the strange sense that there is a pattern to be found. If only you could remember it. The dull ache that once visited you on rare afternoons now arrives every morning, punctual as the chime of the distant church bell. You lie in bed, eyes open, and listen to the slow tick of the clock on the mantel. Each second drags a little heavier than the last, landing with a weight that seems to settle in your chest. You trace the outline of the ceiling with tired eyes, counting cracks in the plaster. You tell yourself you will not take the drops immediately. Not today. Today you will prove something to yourself, though the exact nature of the proof keeps slipping away, elusive as a half-remembered dream. You last until breakfast. The tea is tepid, the bread dry and tasteless. Your hands shake, just a little, as you lift the cup. You tell yourself it is only the weather. Another mist-choked morning in Georgian London. Another day when the sun cannot quite be bothered to pierce the soot and fog. You sit composed, while the maid clears the table. She glances at you, but her expression is neutral, practiced, as if she has learned to avoid the notice of women who spend too long in their nightclothes. You want to tell her you are simply tired, but your tongue feels thick and uncooperative. Instead, you nod and excuse yourself. Upstairs, you open the drawer with the careful, reverent air of a priest unveiling a relic. The bottle is cool in your hand, its weight familiar now, almost comforting. You measure out 25 drops, watching them fall with slow, syrupy reluctance into the spoon. The amber liquid clings to the sides, reluctant to let go. You tip it into your tea, stirring until the faint, bitter tang blends with the floral scent of leaves harvested in a land you have never seen. You drink, slowly. The ache recedes, just enough for you to breathe without noticing the effort. You are not addicted. You are exhausted. This is your refrain, your private catechism, repeated as you tidy your hair in the mirror, as you smooth the wrinkles from your gown. The doctor visits once a fortnight, his presence as impersonal and inevitable as the changing tide. He asks after your health with a brisk, professional air, never quite meeting your eyes. You reply, "Much improved, thank you, doctor." He nods, scribbles something into his ledger, and assures you that you are making excellent progress. He never asks precisely how you are taking your medicine. You do not volunteer the details. Why trouble him with the specifics of your mornings? Some days you delay. Some days you do not. You measure out the drops with a precision that approaches artistry, sometimes adding an extra 5, just to be sure. The difference is subtle, but you notice it, the way the world seems to drift a little further from the sharpness of pain, the way your thoughts smooth themselves into gentle, manageable curves. You do not call this indulgence. You are simply managing your condition. Your appetite for food is diminished, but not your appetite for the ritual. You eat little, but you no longer dread the effort of sitting upright, of holding a cup, of moving from one room to another. You mention to your husband that you may attend church soon. He beams, kisses your hand at dinner, and calls you courageous. You feel nothing, but you nod politely, grateful for his approval. It is easier, you find, to let him believe in your recovery. Time passes in increments marked by the bottle's slow depletion. 2 weeks, perhaps more. You notice the contents have shifted, heavier on one side, the liquid sloshing with a sluggish reluctance. You hold it up to the light, studying the way the amber glows against the window. You are not alarmed. You have been careful, so careful. You have only taken what was necessary. Some days, not even that. Yet the ache returns quietly, insidiously, like dampness creeping into the bones of the house. You wake with a dull pressure in your hips. You linger at the breakfast table, staring at your cooling tea, your spoon idle beside the cup. The maid asks if you would like her to change the linens. You nod, though her words drift past you without meaning. You spend several seconds recalling what day it is. Eventually you remember. You take 25 drops, then 5 more, just to be safe. The pain dulls, refusing to disappear entirely, but you accept this as progress. You are managing. Some mornings, a peculiar buzzing settles behind your eyes, like the wings of a trapped insect. It fades by midday, but you measure 30 drops anyway, determined to stay ahead of it. You reassure yourself it is only temporary. You are still recovering, still healing, just as the doctor said. His voice echoes in your mind, patient and patronizing. The way men speak when they believe they are being kind. You cling to his assurances, repeating them until they lose all meaning. By the week's end, you stop measuring altogether, not because you have surrendered, but because you have become efficient. The bottle tips with the steadiness of a seamstress threading a needle. You know by feel alone the amount required, the moment just before the warmth begins, the flicker of lightness in your chest. You know exactly how to reach it. There is no need to count. Some days you forget that you have taken it at all. You find yourself blinking in the drawing room, the fire unlit, the room too quiet. A novel sits open in your lap, the page dog-eared. You do not remember turning to this chapter. When your husband speaks, his voice seems to drift in from another world, muffled and indistinct. You answer him with vague pleasantries, hoping he will not notice your distraction. If he does, he says nothing. Once you miss a dose entirely. The bottle, misplaced behind a stack of linens, is lost to you until your hands begin to tremble. Not a dramatic shaking, nothing that would alarm the maid, but enough that you struggle with the buttons at the back of your dress. You endure breakfast without the familiar cushion of relief. The sunlight through the shutters seems sharper, cutting into your eyes. By midday, your chest is tight, as though you have been holding your breath for hours. When you finally find the bottle, you drink directly from it. Not much, just enough to make the world soften at the edges. It hits with a suddenness that leaves you drowsy. You take more an hour later, then sleep for most of the afternoon. No one remarks on your absence. That night, you excuse yourself from dinner early. Your husband nods, absorbed in his own thoughts. You are grateful for the silence, grateful for the absence of questions. You sit at your vanity and examine your reflection, searching for signs of change. The lines at the corners of your mouth seem deeper. Your eyes appear too dark. You stare until the face in the mirror blurs, until it seems to smirk back at you, faintly amused by your efforts. The bottle is nearly empty. You know you should mention it. Refill requests are usually handled by your husband or by a discreet note to the physician. There is a procedure, a civility to these things. But the thought of asking fills you with unease. It feels like an accusation, a tacit admission of failure. You have not taken more than was required. You are not addicted. You are simply exhausted. You write the note yourself, signing your name with deliberate care. You fold it, seal it, and hand it to the maid with instructions to deliver it to the apothecary. You do not involve your husband. You tell yourself this is to spare him the inconvenience. When the new bottle arrives, wrapped in oil paper and tied with string, you wait until the house is quiet to open it. The label is identical. The weight, the shape, everything is as it was. You feel something loosen in your chest. Not relief. Certainly not joy. Just the easing of a knot you had not noticed before. You slip the old bottle into the drawer, where it clinks against the tin of pastilles and an unused spool of thread. You intend to dispose of it eventually. You never do. The next week passes in a gentle haze. You do not feel worse. You do not feel much at all. The days are tolerable, so long as you begin them properly. 30 drops in the morning, perhaps a bit more by afternoon, especially on days when you are expected to receive callers. You still dress. You still brush your hair. You still greet your husband as he emerges from his study. The routine persists, mechanical but unremarkable. No one comments on the change. You receive a letter from your sister, something about her eldest learning to ride. You read it twice, the words dissolving as soon as your eyes leave the page. You fold the letter, place it with the others, and promise yourself you will reply soon. One afternoon, you visit the garden. The sky is clear, the hedges neatly trimmed. You sit on the bench near the lilacs, eyes closed, letting the breeze lift your hair. Somewhere, a dog barks. The maid's footsteps crunch softly on the gravel behind you, but you do not turn. You tell yourself you will remain outside for an hour. You manage 12 minutes before the ache in your back drives you indoors. The walk to the house feels longer than it should. That evening, you prepare your tea and add the drops without counting. The bottle fits in your hand as naturally as a pen or a spool of thread. You swirl the mixture, watching the liquid cloud and settle. You drink while the tea is still warm. Gradually, your muscles loosen. The ache in your back becomes distant. The creak of the floorboards quiets. Even your thoughts soften, their edges blunted and harmless. You rest your head against the chair and, for a moment, feel as though someone else is doing the thinking for you. You wake in the same chair, the room dark. A candle has burned halfway down, filling the air with the faint scent of melted wax. Your fingers are stiff. You cannot recall what you were reading, or if you were reading at all. You stand slowly, steadying yourself before crossing to the wash basin. You do not look in the mirror. The next morning, you decide to be careful. You measure 25 drops, telling yourself it is a return to discipline. You will space your doses more deliberately. You are simply tired, and the weather has been poor, and the house is too quiet. You sip your tea slowly. It does not work as well. The headache lingers. You consider taking more. You wait. An hour later, you add another 10, quietly. When the doctor visits that afternoon, you are composed. You sit on the settee in your afternoon gown, inquiring after his wife. He seems pleased by the question. He remarks that you are looking well. You thank him. He asks whether the laudanum has helped. You assure him that it has. He does not ask how often you have taken it, nor when you last needed it. He does not inspect the bottle. He notes something in his ledger and departs. You finish the last few drops 3 days later. You do not realize until you tilt the bottle and nothing pours out. A smear of amber clings stubbornly to the bottom, resisting your attempts to coax it free. You tap the glass. You scrape at the neck with the spoon. For a moment, you almost consider licking the rim. You do not. You sit back, hands folded in your lap, and tell yourself this is a good thing. A brief pause, a chance to regain your balance. That night, you do not sleep. You lie awake, aware of every wrinkle in the linen, every knot in your spine, every creak of the mattress as you breathe. Your skin prickles, as though your body is no longer quite your own. Eventually, you doze, fitful and shallow, waking repeatedly with the sense that time is moving too slowly. You wait until the maid has left to run errands, then sit at your writing desk. You select a sheet of paper, dip your pen, and compose a brief note. You send it with a coin. The parcel arrives that evening. This time, You take the bottle from the maid's tray without comment. You unwrap it with slow, deliberate care, as though handling something precious and fragile. You do not mention it to your husband or the doctor. You do not mark the date. You uncork the bottle and breathe in the scent, then begin again. You tell yourself, as you always have, that this is simply how one manages a condition. There is nothing untoward about it. You are not addicted. You are simply exhausted. But the routine has claimed you. The careful measurements, the private rituals, the unspoken rules you invent and break and reinvent, all have become the scaffolding of your days. You move through the hours with the same quiet determination as before, but with a new, secret urgency. You avoid the eyes of those who might ask questions. You keep the empty bottles hidden away, the old notes tucked beneath the lining of your desk drawer. You have learned to conceal the evidence of your need, even from yourself. In the end, you discover that the routine is its own kind of comfort. The world grows smaller, more manageable, so long as you keep to the pattern. The ache in your body, the fog in your mind, these become familiar companions, softer somehow than the sharpness of waking life. And so you carry on. Each day a measured repetition of the last, each night a quiet negotiation with the self you pretend not to recognize. The city outside rolls on, indifferent, the clatter of wheels and horses muffled by thick curtains and thicker silence. It is only later, when the ache returns stronger than before, that you realize the routine is no longer enough. You find, rather unceremoniously, that you need more laudanum than you did before. Not want, need. This need grows quietly, hardly worth remarking on at first. You tell yourself that, naturally, your constitution has changed. It's not the draft's fault. It's your constitution, your nerves, your particular arrangement of bodily humours, always slightly askew. You tell yourself this as you measure out a few extra drops, 5 more than yesterday, and then 10 more the day after, because the morning's sluggishness lingers long past its welcome. It starts with the smallest of shifts. The usual dose, once your reliable companion, now lifts the edge only half as high. You wait for the familiar hush to settle over your bones, but instead there remains a restless current, a faint buzzing beneath your ribs. Time, always an unruly houseguest, begins to stretch itself thin and loud. Minutes grow heavier, more insistent. You find yourself staring at the mantel clock, willing it to move, and when it finally does, you are disappointed that so little has passed. You try to be patient. You try to wait out this new restlessness, this slight discomfort that leans in close and breathes on your neck. You last an hour. Then, with a sigh, you reach for the bottle and add a few more drops to your spoon. The effect is immediate, though not as dramatic as you might have hoped. The world softens, but only just enough to continue. You tell yourself this is reasonable, sensible even. The next morning, you do it again. 10 extra drops, almost without thinking. You watch the liquid slide along the glass, amber and viscous, and you tell yourself you are simply adjusting. Everyone must adjust now and then. You adjust your shawl when the wind shifts. You adjust your corset when the boning presses too tightly against your lungs. You adjust your laudanum. It's nothing more than good sense. Soon the difference between 25 and 40 drops is hardly worth noting. 40 is just what you need to feel properly set to rights. This isn't indulgence, you insist. This is not abuse. This is management. It is, in the language of the day, a matter of self-care. If anything, you are being prudent. You are simply managing your condition. You become adept at rationalization. You explain it to yourself quietly, almost as if you're confiding in a friend. The problem is not the laudanum. The problem is not you. The problem is the world, the endless parade of duties and small discomforts, the constant thrum of expectation and performance. The drug is merely an answer, a small bottled solution to a problem as old as time. As the days pass, you begin to forget things, not important things. You reassure yourself. Only trifles. You might lose your place mid-sentence, a thought slipping away like a fish darting from your hand. In conversation you pause, pressing your palm to your forehead in a gesture of charming absent-mindedness. Your husband doesn't seem to notice. Or perhaps he notices but chooses, with admirable restraint, to say nothing. You forget an appointment with the seamstress. You forget the day of the week when the bills arrive. You forget, for an hour or more, how long it has been since you last left the house. These lapses are not alarming. They are inconvenient, perhaps, but nothing more. You begin to keep a notebook, a small, practical ledger of reminders. It is not a diary, nothing so sentimental. You use it to track letters to answer, parcels to expect, times when the maid will be out. You read it each morning, then forget it by lunch. Still, the act of writing things down reassures you. It gives the illusion of control. You remind yourself, managing things. Your hands shake now more than they did before. Barely perceptible, but there all the same. You linger too long at the wash basin, watching the tremor ripple through your fingers as you try to steady your cup. You begin wearing gloves more often, even indoors. A small fashion, a modesty, nothing to remark upon. The gloves hide the tremor. They make it easier to believe that nothing is amiss. On days when you have taken too much, too quickly, your vision wavers at the edges. Not darkness exactly, more like the world has grown watery and unreliable. The edges of things shimmer, as if a heat wave has passed through the drawing room. You sit quietly until it passes, breathing as shallowly as your stays will allow. You avoid speaking during these spells. You have learned that your words slur, sliding together like melting ice. Once at dinner, your husband glances at you with a flicker of concern. "Are you quite well?" he asks, his voice polite and distant. You smile, the practiced smile of someone who has answered this question many times before. "It's just the weather," you reply. "It's always the weather." He nods, satisfied. He does not press the matter further. You admire this about him, his ability to accept an answer, regardless of its truth. The doctor, however, is less easily fooled. He studies you for a moment longer than is strictly necessary when you present the bottle for inspection. The label is worn at the corners, the ink blurred by so many anxious hands. He hums to himself, a small, tuneless sound, then produces a fresh bottle from his bag. He says nothing, but his eyebrow arches ever so slightly, an unspoken question hanging in the air. You keep your face neutral. You thank him, as always, and see him to the door. As the latch clicks shut, you feel a flicker of something. Not guilt. Not exactly. More the ghost of guilt. A memory of what it once felt like to mind such things. It passes quickly. You begin to plan your days with more intention. Your first dose comes earlier now, sometimes before the maid has even lit the fire. It helps you dress. It helps you sit still through breakfast, through the clatter of dishes and the scrape of forks. Your second dose arrives by mid-afternoon with the tea tray. The third dose, well, only if needed. If there are guests, if the correspondence piles up, if the day stretches on and your nerves refuse to settle, you tell yourself it is all very controlled. The bottle's empty faster now. You no longer count the days between refills, but you can tell by the weight when a bottle is fading. You order more without a second thought. You make a habit of rotating your apothecaries, one near Lincoln's Inn, another closer to the square, a third somewhere off the Strand. Each knows your face, but never your name. The prescriptions are never questioned. The handwriting is always the same, though you can't remember when it last belonged to a doctor who truly knew you. Once you wake in the middle of the night, heart hammering, the room smudged with shadow. You are not feverish. There is no pain. But something inside you flinches, as if your body has been hastily stitched together and is now coming apart at the seams. You sit up, sip water, open the drawer, and gaze at the bottle. You pause, just for a moment, a brief, flickering hesitation, then measure out a dose and swallow. Calm returns, slow and inevitable. You begin to lose time, though never in dramatic ways. An hour misplaced here, a task forgotten there. You look up from your writing desk and realize the candles have burned halfway down, the wax pooling in silent accusation. You open a novel and find your bookmark several pages ahead of where your memory insists you stopped. You drift into the kitchen with no idea what called you there. These are small things, you tell yourself. Harmless. You begin keeping a second bottle, not because you require a double ration, but because the fear of running out seems, at times, unbearable. One bottle in the drawer, one on the nightstand. You switch them often, so neither grows jealous of the other. The older bottle is cloudy now, its label peeling at the edges, a little talisman against the terror of emptiness. Your husband, always so careful, notes your appetite in passing. He mentions, with the gentlest concern, that you have grown thin. At dinner, he brushes your shoulder with a touch so light you could pretend it never happened. He asks if the cook has been preparing your favorites. You smile, of course. You say yes. You excuse yourself early, and he does not object. You still attend services. You still answer letters, remember birthdays, maintain the small courtesies of life. You know which neighbors are with child, which cousins have married, which friends have retreated to the country. You have not disappeared. You have merely narrowed. You remain polite, composed, irreproachable. But the need grows, faster than you can ration. 40 drops becomes your baseline. 50 is common. 60, on days of particular difficulty, feels almost reasonable. The warmth that once suffused your body fades quickly now, a thin echo of comfort. You chase it with tea. You wait longer for it to settle. You double-check that you've taken your dose because the sensation is so faint you can't quite trust your memory. Sometimes you take more, not out of carelessness, but because you feel wrong and cannot stop. It isn't only the quantity you realize. It is the shape of your thoughts, the peculiar rhythm of your movements. The rituals that once felt like management now feel like necessity. And so you wait for the next morning, knowing you rise too quickly, and your knees, those traitorous joints, will fall beneath you for just a second. But that is a story for another slow, trembling day. And then, one morning, you do rise too quickly, just as you always do, because old habits have a stubborn way of outliving their usefulness. Your knees buckle for a moment, as if they have been caught off guard by the simple physics of standing. The sensation is brief, almost dismissible, but it leaves behind an unsettling emptiness, as though your bones are no longer entirely convinced by their own architecture. You pause, hand braced against the bedpost, pretending this is all perfectly ordinary. You tell yourself you have always been a little clumsy in the mornings. You are not addicted. You are simply tired. It becomes easier, and somehow more necessary, to rest these days. You find yourself gravitating toward the stiff-backed chair by the window, your grandmother's shawl drawn tightly around your shoulders, even when the sun is bright and the air in the room is absolutely indifferent to your chills. You move slowly, not because you are cultivating elegance, but because you are quietly negotiating with your own body for a few more moments of stability. Every step is a cautious little wager against gravity. You are simply managing your condition. Constipation becomes one of those reliable, everyday companions, something solid and unyielding in a world that keeps slipping sideways. You treat it with the seriousness of a minor diplomatic crisis. Prune water is your first line of defense. Stewed pears follow, offered to yourself as a small mercy. The maid, who is either too polite or too bored to comment, starts placing a basin beside your bed again. Not for the old fever, not for the delicate nerves, but for the other, less dignified consequences of imbalance. You invent elaborate little systems to cope. Warm compresses at dawn, bitter tonics before dinner, a peculiar stretching routine executed behind the folding screen, always out of sight. None of it works for long. None of it works twice in a row. You mention nothing to anyone. You are only tired, after all. And then the night sweats return, just as the London gardens begin to blur with the first heat of May. You wake in the small hours with your nightgown clinging to your back, the sheets tangled and damp beneath you, the pillowcase heavy with the sour scent of your own skin. You try opening the window, but the air outside is thin and mean, doing nothing to cool the fever that isn't quite a fever. You test your temperature once, then again, convinced you must be mistaken. But the sweat isn't that of illness. It is something else, something stickier, a kind of residue that leaves you hollowed and shaking. You change your linen in the dark, wrap yourself in the dry end of the blanket, and shiver until dawn. When the sun finally arrives, you behave as though the night was perfectly normal. You are simply fatigued. Your dreams begin to shift, growing tighter, more insistent. Once they were only scattered scenes, a half-remembered street, a voice you could not place, a house that no longer stands. Now, every night, you return to the same dim room, the same four walls, the same closed door. It is always dusk. Someone stands on the other side, breathing steadily through the keyhole. You cannot see them, but you know they are waiting. You wake, heart pounding, clutching the blanket to your chest. Your hand finds the bottle before your eyes are even open. You do not bother to count the drops these days. You do not even sit up. You are not addicted. You are exhausted. A new pain announces itself, sharp, almost electric, deep in your jaw. It begins with the back molars, a dull ache that pulses when you bite into bread, then retreats. You learn to chew on the other side, as though you might outwit the pain through sheer stubbornness. But soon enough, the other side begins to throb as well, just often enough to remind you whose body this really is. You try rinsing your mouth with warm water, holding the heat against your cheek. You consider writing to your husband's dentist. But the thought of explaining your symptoms, of listing your ever-growing catalogue of discomforts, makes you tired just thinking about it. You decide to do nothing for now. You are just a little run down. Your vision, too, seems to betray you by degrees. The edges of the world blur, then sharpen unpredictably. You squint at your embroidery, blink more often than before, polish your spectacles until your fingers ache. You catch yourself cleaning them, even when there is no smudge to be seen. Sometimes, when the haze lifts for a moment, you feel as if you have stumbled forward in time. There is a sense of missing hours, of the day slipping sideways, just out of reach. You look in the mirror one morning and are startled, not by what you see, but by the way your reflection seems to hesitate, lagging just slightly behind your movements, as though it is waiting for you to finish deciding who you are. One afternoon, as the city hums quietly outside, you catch a flicker in the mirror, just over your left shoulder. A shadow, thin and deliberate, where nothing in the room could possibly cast it. You turn quickly, heart leaping, but there is nothing there. You steady yourself, force a smile, and pretend not to notice the way your lips are trembling. You retie your hair ribbon with fingers that feel curiously numb, as if you are wearing gloves made of someone else's skin. You do not mention this to anyone. You are simply having a difficult day. The shadows grow bolder as the week goes on. Late in the afternoon, in the drawing room, you spot something in the farthest corner, a darkness that is somehow thicker than the rest, as if it has been waiting for you all along. You stare at it until your eyes burn, refusing to blink. It does not move. It does not need to. You are certain that if you look away, it will reach for you. You light a candle and set it on the nearest table, as though this is an entirely reasonable thing to do in broad daylight. The shadow recedes ever so slightly. You nod, as if you have struck a bargain. You fold your hands in your lap, bottle just beneath your palm, and pretend there is nothing unusual here at all. You decide, at last, to attempt a small experiment. Not a grand gesture, just a modest deviation from routine. You choose to skip your morning dose, not forever, not even for a full day, but just to see what happens. You make it through tea, through the first hour of sunlight, congratulating yourself on your resolve. By mid-morning, a faint itching begins, a prickling beneath the skin. Not quite a rash, but something stubborn and insistent. You rise too quickly from your chair and feel a cramp twist through your stomach. Your knees buckle again. This time, you catch yourself against the writing desk, knuckles white with effort. You do not cry. You bite down hard and breathe slowly. In through your nose, out through your teeth. The maid knocks at your door. You announce, in a voice that sounds oddly foreign, that you are resting. She does not venture inside. You slide down to the rug, back pressed against the bed frame, and wait for the sensation to pass. It does not. By noon, you are hunched over the basin, retching. There is nothing to bring up but a thin string of yellow bile and a metallic taste that clings to your mouth like old pennies. Your eyes water. Your hands seize up, fingers curling tight. You brace your forearm against your ribs and feel sweat running in cold rivulets down your spine. You know precisely what will make it better. You know where the bottle is. Yet you sit, stubborn and shivering, telling yourself you can wait a little longer. You are not addicted. You are simply testing your limits. By early afternoon, the trembling has grown more insistent. Not enough to alarm anyone, but enough that you knock your hairbrush off the table as you reach for the lamp. The sound is sharp, startling, much louder than it should be. You mutter a curse and sink to the floor once more, knees drawn tight, face pressed into the soft cotton of your nightgown. The maid knocks again, this time even softer, as if she is apologizing for the intrusion. You do not answer. She leaves a tray outside your door. You can smell the broth cooling, its scent curling beneath the door like a gentle accusation. You cannot remember the last time you ate. At last, you reach for the drawer. The bottle is there, cool and reassuring in your palm, half full and gleaming with promise. You do not hesitate. You uncork it and drink directly from the neck. The taste is sharper this way, more medicinal, less forgiving. You cough, first once, then twice, and then you breathe deliberately, counting to 30, as if this number holds some secret power to restore order. You wait. The shaking, which had become your constant companion, begins to slip away. Not all at once, not entirely, but enough that you can unclench your jaw. The pain at the base of your skull dulls to a manageable ache. The crawling sensation beneath your skin subsides, replaced by a fragile, tentative calm. You close your eyes and lie on your side, still on the floor, one arm tucked beneath your head, the other wrapped across your waist in a loose embrace, as if you are trying to hold yourself together. When you wake, it is evening. The window is dark. The candle has burned to a shallow pool of wax. You manage to sit up, back stiff, hair tangled and damp against your neck. You breathe with your mouth open, as if you are learning the mechanics of living all over again. Standing feels impossible. The bottle rests in your hand. You do not put it away. You are simply preparing for the next time. That night, the dream returns. Same door, same shadow, same slow, measured breathing from the other side. You do not scream. You do not even whimper. In the morning, you attempt to dress. Your hands fumble with the hooks of your bodice. You sit down halfway through, lightheaded, and wait for the world to stop spinning. The laces feel cruelly tight today. You loosen them without comment. When the maid enters, you ask for tea. She brings it, eyes carefully averted, and pretends not to notice that your stockings do not match. You take your dose promptly, with a steadier hand than yesterday. You stir it into your tea, swallowing it quickly, as if chasing down a bitter secret before it can escape. You stand, waiting for the warmth to spread, for the blood to slow, for the world to reassemble itself into something navigable. It takes longer than it used to. You add a second splash, just a small one, just to catch up. The trembling fades again, gradually, until your shoulders quiet and your hands become almost still. You press your fingers to your temples, breathing deeply. The ache remains, but it has softened, settling into a familiar, manageable shape. You are not addicted, you are enduring. And so you drift on, half present, half spectral, caught in the dull machinery of your own decline and the gentle, unremarkable isolation that no one seems to notice. Outside, the city clatters on, as indifferent as ever. Inside, the world grows smaller, quieter, narrower with each passing day. But there comes a moment, sooner or later, when even you must acknowledge that endurance is not the same as recovery. The next chapter begins, as it always must. You are forced to ask for help, not aloud, not directly, but visibly. You do not remember the first time you truly needed it, not the gentle, habitual longing of the afternoon, nor the mild ache behind your eyes as dusk crawled in. No, that first true need arrives quietly, as most things do in this house. It is not hunger, not thirst, something more insistent, a dryness in the bones, a restless humming beneath the skin. You tell yourself that you are simply managing your condition. You have always managed. You are not addicted. You are exhausted. You find yourself sitting on the edge of the bed, hands folded so tightly in your lap that the knuckles shine white through the skin. The bottle glimmers on the bureau, amber and innocent, half hidden by a stack of dull letters and a sprig of wilted lavender. The maid enters, asks if you require anything. You say no, so softly you doubt she hears it, and she bows her head and withdraws, leaving the door ajar by the width of a hand. You listen to the sounds of the house, the shudder of the window pane, the distant clatter of cutlery, the faint, perpetual cough from the room below. Your own breath is a thin, persistent noise. You try not to think about how long you have been sitting here, or how many evenings have passed in this same way. You reach for the bottle. Your hand is steadier than you expect, but the cork resists, turning slick in your palm. You tell yourself it is only a precaution, a brief remedy for a passing discomfort. The first drops sting your tongue. You let them linger, just a moment, as if savoring something rare and precious, rather than the medicine you now take by rote. The taste is sharper than you remember, more bitter, and it burns in the throat before sliding into warmth. You think of the doctor's words. If it allows you rest, it is doing its work. You almost laugh, but your mouth is too dry for the sound to escape. You are managing your condition. That is all. The hours after dosing stretch out, long and formless. You sit in the armchair by the window, watching the street below. Your vision flickers at the edges, the lamplight wavers, and the figures passing by seem to dissolve into shadow before they reach the corner. You blink, but the world does not sharpen. You close your eyes and let the sensation wash through you, like cool water running over fevered skin. You remember, vaguely, a time when you moved through rooms with purpose. Now you drift. Your footsteps are muffled by the rug. Your skirts barely brush the furniture. The house feels enormous, echoing, filled with corners you have not visited in weeks. You avoid the mirrors. You do not need to see yourself to know what you have become. Hollowed, faded, a thin outline of a woman held together by habit and polite silence. Sometimes you catch your reflection anyway. The glass in the hallway is warped, distorting your face into unfamiliar angles. You pause, studying the stranger who stares back. Her eyes are ringed in shadow, a mouth set in a line of quiet determination or resignation, you cannot tell which. You raise a hand in greeting. She does not move. You spend entire afternoons thinking of nothing at all. Your mind drifts, unmoored, and you lose hours to the slow, relentless ticking of the clock on the mantel. The doctor calls this rest. You call it absence. You are thinner now. The bones of your wrists protrude when you clasp your hands. The rings on your fingers slip and spin, loose and clattering. You keep them on out of habit. Your dress gathers around you in awkward folds, the fabric no longer shaped by the body it was made for. The stays dig in at odd places, pinching skin that has grown unfamiliar. You let the maid adjust them, her hands brisk and competent, her expression carefully blank. She does not look at your face. You do not blame her. You eat what you are given, if you remember to eat at all. Sometimes the food arrives cold, untouched, and is taken away again with only the faintest sigh of disappointment. You drink tea, thick with honey, hoping it will coat your throat and quiet the ache that settles there. Most days it tastes of nothing. Your husband visits on occasion. He does not linger. He asks after your health, his voice measured, patient, as if inquiring about the state of the garden or the repair of the roof. You assure him that you are well. You tell him you are simply tired, that the season is changing, that the doctor has prescribed rest and light reading. He nods, satisfied, and leaves you to your peace. You do not tell him about the gaps, the places where memory falters and slips away. You do not mention the hours that vanish, the conversations you do not recall, the faces that blur into shadow. You are managing your condition. You are not addicted. You are exhausted. There are days when you cannot remember what you have done. You find a letter in your own hand, addressed but never sent. The ink has smudged, the words trailing off mid-sentence. You hold it up to the light, squinting, trying to recall the shape of your own intentions. You cannot. You search your room for evidence of your own existence. An empty cup. A book left open to a page you do not recall reading. A ribbon fallen behind the chair. Each object is a puzzle, a faint trace of someone you once were or might still be. You gather them into a small pile on the dresser, uncertain whether to keep or discard them. The bottle grows lighter. You measure the remaining laudanum by weight and by sound, tilting it gently and listening to the liquid shift inside. You wonder how much is enough. You wonder if you will know when you have crossed the line from relief to dependence, or if that line has already faded behind you. The doctor returns. He arrives with the same brisk efficiency, the same powdery scent of starch and camphor clinging to his coat. He sits across from you, notebook at the ready, and asks the usual questions. Are you sleeping? Yes. Are you eating? Yes. Are you in pain? No. He nods, recording each answer with a small, satisfied smile. He does not ask how often you take the drops now. He does not ask why your hands tremble or why you cannot meet his gaze for more than a moment. He offers advice, broth, rest, gentle walks in the garden if the weather allows. He tells you to continue with the laudanum. It is doing you good. You thank him because that is what is required. He closes his notebook, adjusts his cuffs, and leaves you alone with your silence and your medicine. The world outside your window blurs with the rain. The garden is a tangle of mud and bare branches. You watch the drops run in crooked paths down the glass, tracing patterns you will not remember. You hear the distant rattle of a carriage, the brief clatter of hooves, and then nothing. You begin to speak to yourself, quietly at first, then with more confidence as the days slip by. You murmur reassurances into the hush of the room, small, soothing phrases, like a nurse to a fretful child. You apologize aloud for things you cannot name. You answer questions that no one asks. The maid hears you once and hesitates in the doorway, arms full of linens. You smile at her, or try to. She sets the bundle on the bed and leaves without a word. You find yourself standing by the window one afternoon, watching the sky darken. Your hands are pressed flat against the glass. Your breath leaves small, foggy patches on the pane. You trace them absently with a fingertip, drawing circles that fade almost as soon as they appear. You do not know what day it is. You do not ask. There is a noise in the corridor, a shuffling, a cough, the muted sound of someone setting down a tray. You do not go to investigate. You listen until the footsteps retreat, then return to your own thoughts, such as they are. You lie on the bed in the middle of the day, watching the ceiling. The plaster is cracked, the pattern of hairline fractures forming a web that stretches from one corner to the other. You count the lines, losing track and starting over, unsure whether you are inventing new ones as you go. Your dreams, when they come, are thick and unyielding. You wander through empty rooms, opening doors that lead only to more doors. Sometimes you catch a glimpse of yourself in a mirror, younger, untroubled, waiting. You wake with the taste of laudanum still on your tongue, sweet and metallic. Your mouth is dry. Your limbs are heavy, as if you have slept for years. You sit up slowly, every movement deliberate and cautious, as though the world itself might shatter if you are not careful. You dress with the maid's help. She buttons your gown, ties your apron, smooths your hair with gentle hands. You thank her. She nods and departs, leaving you alone with the familiar hush. You drift through the house, trailing your fingers along the banister, pausing in doorways as if searching for something you have lost. You find a cup on the windowsill, not yours, rimmed with a faint trace of rouge. You set it aside, unwilling to puzzle over its origin. You sit in the armchair with your journal, the pen poised above the page. The words do not come easily. You write your name slowly, as if reminding yourself. The ink pools and dries. You close the book and set it aside. You are not addicted. You are simply managing your condition. You tell yourself this every morning, every evening, each time the bottle passes from hand to lips. It is a mantra, a shield against the creeping suspicion that you have slipped beyond remedy. The house grows quieter. The days blend together. You lose track of time, of meals, of the changing light. The world shrinks to the size of your room, your bed, the chair by the window. Occasionally you feel something sharp, an urge to laugh, to cry, to shout, but it fades before it reaches the surface. You smooth your skirts, adjust your gloves, and return to your routine. You are managing your condition. It is all you can do. And so you continue, day after day, tracing the same patterns, following the same rituals. The bottle grows lighter. The shadows grow longer. You watch yourself disappear, quietly, politely, as if slipping out of a crowded room without disturbing a soul. Dependence is not a thunderclap. It is a slow, gentle forgetting of hunger, of laughter, of yourself. You are not addicted. You are exhausted. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimes. You count the bells, lose your place, and start again. You rest. You wait. You listen for footsteps, for voices, for the faint promise of change. A few days pass. You try to convince yourself it is just another day, that a missing bottle is a trivial matter, easily resolved. But the truth is, by the time your hand meets the empty drawer, you are already rehearsing excuses for the person you imagine you will become without it. You are not addicted, you remind yourself. You are simply managing your condition. The bottle is gone, but you are not defeated. Not yet. You pace the length of your small room, back and forth, as if motion might conjure a solution from the floorboards. Each footstep is muffled by the threadbare carpet, a dull rhythm that matches the thud inside your head. The headache is tender and insistent, blooming in slow concentric circles behind your eyes. You press a cool cloth to your forehead and try to recall exactly when you last felt well, but your memory resists. It is slippery now, unreliable. Events drift and blur at the edges, never quite resolving into a clear line. You pull on your day dress with slow, awkward movements, the fabric catching on your elbows and shoulders, as if the garment itself is reluctant to cooperate. Your fingers fumble with the buttons. The stays bite at your ribs. Each task takes longer than it should. You remind yourself, again, dryly, that you are simply out of practice, not incapacitated. You are not addicted. You are exhausted. Outside, the air is sharper than you expect, bracing and thin. The world is pale, nearly washed clean of color, as if the city itself has been left out in the rain too long. You draw your shawl tighter and step into the street, careful to lock the door behind you. The cobblestones are uneven beneath your shoes, pitching you slightly to one side, and you have the distinct impression that the ground is not as trustworthy as it once was. The morning is quiet, a hush broken only by the creak of cartwheels and the distant clatter of a delivery boy making his rounds. The shops along the lane have not yet opened their shutters. A solitary woman sweeps her stoop in a mechanical fashion, her eyes never quite meeting yours. You think for a moment that she knows something about you that you do not. You walk toward the market square, telling yourself it will do you good to be among people, to breathe the air that has not yet filtered through a bedroom window. Each step is an act of bravado. Your arms hang loosely at your sides, too long and unfamiliar, so you cross them for comfort. You pass a baker's shop and catch the scent of yeast and flour, but it turns your stomach. Hunger is a theoretical concept now, something you remember from before, not a sensation you truly feel. As you approach the square, the sounds grow denser. The city stirs. There are voices, laughter, the metallic ring of coins, the chop of a butcher's knife on wood. You keep your eyes fixed on the horizon, pretending you do not notice the glances that pass over you. You wonder if your discomfort is visible, if the tremor in your hands is a matter for public interest, or just a minor spectacle for the curious. Suddenly, a dog barks from a window overhead. The sound is too loud, splitting the morning in two. You flinch, startled out of your careful rhythm, and catch the eye of a man across the road. He looks at you with mild confusion, as if trying to place a familiar face in an unfamiliar context. You offer him a stiff, apologetic smile, the kind women are trained to give when they are caught in the act of existing inconveniently. You step off the curb and feel your ankle roll. You recover, but the sensation lingers, a warning. Your body is unreliable, and you are no longer certain where your limits lie. You glance down at your gloves, now damp with sweat. They feel like someone else's hands. You flex your fingers, willing them to remember their purpose. The market is ahead. You can hear it before you see it. Voices layered one atop another, the scrape of baskets, the slap of wet fish on stone. The air is thick with the smell of onions, smoke, and the faint sweetness of bruised fruit. You step into the square, and the world seems to contract around you. The noise is not loud, but it is relentless, wrapping itself around your head and chest. Someone bumps your shoulder. You step back instinctively, colliding with a crate of cabbages. The vendor scowls and mutters something you do not catch. You murmur an apology and move on, grateful for the anonymity of the crowd. Your vision is beginning to pulse, the edges shimmering with a faint silvery light. You tell yourself you simply need to sit down, to gather yourself before moving on. A child darts past, laughing, and the sound is sharp, almost cruel in its clarity. You feel yourself splintering, not with a crash, but with a gentle, almost courteous unraveling. Your knees buckle. You crouch, then lower yourself to the ground, as though you have chosen this spot to rest, as though it is perfectly natural to collapse in the middle of the marketplace on a Thursday morning. There is no panic. No one rushes to your aid immediately. You hear the distant shouts of merchants, the clatter of a dropped coin, the soft ripple of laughter that may or may not be directed at you. You wait for embarrassment to bloom, but it does not. You simply drift, hovering somewhere between shame and relief. When you open your eyes again, you are not outside. You are in your own bed, the sheets tangled around your legs, the windows shut tight against the day. The room is dim, the lamp snuffed out. Your mouth is dry. Your hair has been brushed, though not well, and there is a knot behind your ear that tugs when you shift your head. Your underclothes are damp with sweat, and your skin feels thin, nearly transparent. You lie very still, listening for sounds from the rest of the house. Nothing. The maid must be asleep or avoiding you. You cannot hear your husband, but then you rarely do. He moves quietly, as if practicing invisibility. You blink up at the ceiling and try to reconstruct the sequence of events. The street, the market, the laughter, the ground. After that, nothing. Someone must have carried you home. Someone must have recognized you, or at least recognized the situation. You wonder if it was the vendor with the cabbages, or the man across the road. You try to picture yourself, slumped in the square, your shawl slipping, your gloves askew. You hope, with a kind of desperate politeness, that it looked like fainting, that it looked respectable. You check your arms for bruises and find none. Someone was gentle. You run your fingers through your hair and discover a few pins missing. You picture them lost somewhere on the cobblestones, a small private offering to the city. You wonder if anyone noticed. You reach almost automatically for the drawer beside your bed. Your hand shakes, but you know before you open it that the bottle will be there. A new one, clean and tightly wrapped, the paper still crisp. You untie the string with trembling fingers and set the wrapping in the waste bin beneath the desk. The bottle is cold and familiar, the glass smooth against your palm. You hold it for a long moment, studying it, as if it might offer you an explanation. You hesitate, not from guilt, but from simple confusion. You cannot tell if you have had too little or too much, if the collapse in the square was a punishment for deprivation or a consequence of excess. You have lost any sense of what is normal. The line between remedy and affliction is so faint now, it might as well not exist. You take a dose anyway. Of course you do. The trembling subsides almost immediately. Your vision clears. You sink back onto the bed, breathing as deeply as you can. Your teeth ache. Your legs throb. Your hands are brittle, as though the bones have been hollowed out and replaced with air. But the ache inside your ribs, the hollow place that gnaws at you, recedes just enough for you to rest. In the morning, your husband appears in the doorway. He does not linger. He asks, with the mildest curiosity, if you are feeling more yourself. You nod. He accepts this and leaves. He does not ask about the market, or the collapse, or how you came to be where you were not meant to be. You are grateful for this omission. You are not certain whether it is courtesy or embarrassment, or simply the English way of letting a crisis pass in silence. The maid is subdued. She brings your tea and avoids your gaze, her sleeve marked with a faint smudge as though someone grabbed her in haste. You think of asking her, gently, if she saw you yesterday, but decide against it. Dignity, it seems, is best preserved by silence. You sip your tea by the fire, the cup trembling in your grip. You consider writing a letter, but cannot recall to whom. The paper curls in the heat of your hand. You set it aside. You pick up a book, only to find the words have slipped from the page. You stare at the print until the lines blur, then close it quietly and place it back on the table. Outside, the wind shifts, sending a shudder through the panes. Someone coughs in the alley behind the garden wall. A carriage rattles by, indifferent, the world continuing as though nothing at all has happened. You pull the curtain closed, shutting out the thin, intrusive light. You lie down again, feeling the familiar slide of surrender as you let yourself drift. You tell yourself, not for the first time, that you are simply managing your condition. This is just the cycle. Collapse, recovery, collapse again. You have always been very good at appearing respectable. But as you listen to the silence settling in the house, you sense something shifting. The routine is unchanged, but the ground beneath it feels less certain. You close your eyes, and for a moment, the ache in your chest is replaced by something quieter. A pause, a breath, a sense that even cycles have a cost. Rest now, for soon you will need to account for more than just your supply. The money begins to run out. The money trickles away, almost imperceptibly at first. Not for bread or coal or soap. Your husband's household accounts remain as sturdy and regular as always, ticking along with the comforting indifference of a well-oiled clock. But your own allowance, the 2 sovereigns that arrive each Thursday, folded in paper and tucked discreetly beneath your chemises, has begun to shrink in its sufficiency. You find yourself counting the days between Thursdays, watching the coins dwindle in their little purse, measuring out your needs as if you are parceling out rations in a long winter. He never asks if you need more. He simply leaves the money where he always has. And you thank him when it occurs to you. Your gratitude as perfunctory as the nod he gives in reply. There is a mutual understanding, a sort of tacit choreography. Neither of you will name the thing you are both pretending not to notice. He assumes you spend it on ribbons, pins, perhaps a new skein of embroidery floss, idle comforts, small tokens of femininity for a woman who is, after all, meant to be occupied by gentle pursuits. You imagine, with a dry amusement, the look he would give if you announced you were using it for laudanum. That is medicine, after all, and medicine is the province of the doctor, not the Thursday allowance. At first, you are careful. You draw out each coin, one for the apothecary, one for the haberdasher, a few pence for whatever is needed to maintain appearances. The rituals remain intact. A walk down Bedford Row, the polite inspection of a shop window, your fingers tracing the worn edge of your shawl as if weighing the worth of a repair. You nod at women whose faces you half remember, smile with a little too much determination at those who do not bother to smile back. There are children, baskets, the endless bustle of the street. You inhabit this scene like an actor who has forgotten her lines, but continues to move through the blocking with a certain grace. And then, as if following a script you don't recall writing, you veer away from the main streets and slip into the alley behind the square. The boy from the apothecary is there, pretending to sweep the stoop, though you both know the real business. He has stopped asking questions. He simply takes your coin and presses the bottle into your gloved hand. Sometimes he counts the change and, with a conspiratorial air, slips you a peppermint sweet, as if to make it all less sordid. You accept it in silence. He is still young enough to believe in these gestures. You are old enough to feel only the faintest sting of shame. You tell yourself you are not addicted. You are simply managing your condition. There is a difference, or so you insist, especially on the weeks when the money runs out by Tuesday. Not every week, you reassure yourself. Only the difficult ones, when the pressure in your chest is unbearable and the world seems to scrape against your skin. Those are the days when you try to make the bottle last, counting drops with the precision of a miser, and yet somehow the glass grows lighter much too quickly. 40 drops, then 45. Once, in desperation, you drink straight from the bottle and spend the rest of the afternoon oscillating between nausea and relief, as though your body cannot decide if it wants to punish you or reward you. The line between comfort and necessity dissolves. It is all necessity now. You know that if you asked your husband for more, he would give it without argument. That is not the problem. The problem is what would come after. The questions, the careful inventory of the cabinet, the sudden, dreadful attention. You cling to your secrecy not because you expect mercy from it, but because it is the last boundary you have not yet crossed. So you adapt, as all resourceful women do. You borrow against yourself, skipping breakfast, dismissing the laundress a week early, feigning an attack of nerves to excuse your solitude. You take a brooch, one you scarcely wear, but which your mother gave you, and wrap it in tissue. The pawn shop on Theobald's Road smells of lard and burnt sugar, and something faintly chemical, as though the air itself is slightly toxic. You place the brooch on the counter, your smile a performance honed by years of polite society. The pawnbroker does not return it. You receive enough for 2 bottles, perhaps 3 if you are careful. You walk home with the coins sweating in your palm, and the uneasy sensation that you have made yourself a little lighter, as though something essential has been exchanged for the price of relief. The doctor comes and goes. He sits by your bedside, asks his 3 questions. How are you sleeping? Are you eating well? Do you feel any pain? And you answer with the same vague reassurances. Some, you say, not quite. It comes and goes. He nods, distracted, and scribbles a new label for the bottle that will join its fellows on your nightstand. You wonder sometimes whether he hears your answers at all, or simply registers the cadence of your voice and moves on. You smile at him as he leaves. The smile is automatic, a muscle memory, nothing more. The maid, once chatty and eager, now moves through the room with careful silence. You sense her watching, her eyes flickering to the bottles lined up on your table. One afternoon, you catch her gaze lingering, a second too long. You cough, adjust your pillow, and she looks away, cheeks flushing in embarrassment. You wonder if she knows, or if she only suspects. You wonder if, in some future moment of loyalty or fear, she will speak. You attempt to hide the bottles, first in the drawer, then behind your winter dresses, even beneath a stack of hymnals you have not opened since Easter. But it is no use. You always find them again, and there are more than you expected. Bottles, labels, scraps of blue paper, evidence of your own quiet desperation accumulating in every corner. You begin to suspect theft. The tincture vanishes faster than you remember using it. The tea tastes weaker. The comfort arrives later. You count the drops, double-check the spoons, lift each bottle to the light as if you might divine the truth from the shadow of liquid at the bottom. You keep a mental tally, and yet the math never adds up. At first you blame the maid, then the boy from the apothecary. But the facts refuse to cooperate. You are left with one conclusion, so unpalatable you almost laugh. You are the thief. You are the one who forgets, who doses twice in the same hour, who wakes in the middle of a conversation with no memory of what came before. You are the one saying, "Just a little more then. Just enough to sleep then. Just enough to stop the trembling." There is no one left to accuse. You do not cry when the realization settles over you. Instead, you lie perfectly still, feeling the truth move through your body like a chill. There is nothing to be done about it now. You are simply managing your condition. You are not addicted. You are exhausted. You repeat this, a mantra, while the world slips quietly by. The next Thursday, your husband leaves the allowance on the hall table. Not in the drawer, but out in the open, as if daring you to acknowledge the shift. You do not mention it. You collect your gloves and step out into the damp air, coins tucked carefully so their clink will not betray you. The boy is absent today, replaced by an older clerk whose expression is all politeness and pity. You purchase one bottle, then another, then a third, just in case. The coins are spent before the sun sets. That night, you climb into bed with a book you cannot read. The words swim before your eyes, sentences doubling and blurring as you stare at the page. Your husband asks a question about the weather. You nod, not trusting yourself to answer, and take another dose before sleep. Not too much. Not quite. Just enough to smooth the edges, to carry you gently through the night. In the morning, you return to the pawnbroker, this time with your embroidery scissors, the ones shaped like a silver bird. You have not used them in months, but your hands tremble as you slide them across the counter. The man does not ask why. He does not need to. And so the cycle continues, tighter and more desperate with each passing week. The rituals that once offered comfort now feel like obligations, hollow performances you can no longer believe. The secrecy which once protected you now isolates you. There is no one left to confide in, not your husband, not the doctor, not even yourself. You begin to suspect that you have become your own saboteur, the architect of your decline. The realization is as bracing as cold water, and as quietly devastating as the crack of something precious, breaking out of sight. Still, you persist. What else is there? And so, Thursday comes again, and with it, the faint hope that this time you will do better. You will ration, you will manage, you will remember who you were before the bottles multiplied behind closed doors. But you know, even as you make these promises, that you are only delaying the inevitable. Eventually, you tell yourself it is time to stop. And with that thought, the first tremors of withdrawal and the slow descent into isolation begin to take hold. You simply decide that today is the day. Of course, you can stop whenever you like, but as you make that decision, you can feel your body tightening with a strain that feels like a violin string, stretched and humming just behind your eyes. The bottle sits beside you, almost empty, the glass catching a thin ribbon of afternoon light. You have already spent your weekly allowance at the apothecary, handed over coins with hands that shook only a little, and now your jewelry box offers nothing but a broken clasp and a cameo pendant, the chain long since pawned. You consider returning to the pawnbroker, but you hesitate. Even you know that twice in 1 week would raise eyebrows, and the last thing you need is to be noticed. You have already lied enough this month. To the maid, to the assistant who wraps your parcels in brown paper, and most of all, to yourself. You promised you would make the last bottle stretch, sip it only when truly necessary, ration each amber drop. Of course, you did not. You are not addicted. You are simply exhausted. Now, the bottle is dry, and you count the days, 4 of them, until the next envelope appears, tucked discreetly on the parlor mantel. 4 days might as well be a century. You try to prepare, as if endurance is simply a matter of arrangement. You light the fire too early, though the April air is warm enough to open the windows. You wet a cloth and fold it carefully against your forehead, mimicking the sickly heroines in oil portraits. You arrange yourself in the armchair, knees drawn up under your dressing gown, and sip lemon water in slow, measured swallows, as if the act of ritual could make it work. You remind yourself that pain can be survived, that you have done so before. Childbirth lasted longer after all, and that pain had an end. This must have an end as well. You whisper it softly, over and over, as though repetition might make it true. By evening, a coldness settles inside you, not the kind that can be chased off with the fire or with layers of blankets, but an inward chill, rooted somewhere behind your ribs. You pull your dressing gown tighter, feeling the dampness at the nape of your neck where sweat beads, despite the shivering. You lie on your side, eyes fixed on the ceiling, willing the room to stop its slow, syrupy spin. The ceiling itself turns a waxy, unfamiliar shade of pink, as if the sun has leaked through the plaster and melted the paint. The maid knocks at the door, a single, polite tap. You say nothing. She leaves a tray on the landing and retreats, her shoes squeaking on the boards, the clink of porcelain fading down the hall. You imagine calling out to her, asking for company or help. But when you try, your voice lodges somewhere deep in your chest, as if you had swallowed it and forgotten how to retrieve it. By midnight, the cramps arrive, curling your fingers in on themselves, flexing your toes until the skin feels raw and bruised. Your stomach clenches in rolling, unpredictable waves. You want to be sick, but there is nothing left to bring up. Only a thin ribbon of yellow bile, sharp and bitter, flecked with the memory of the last cup of tea. You spit into the basin and wipe your mouth with your sleeve. You smell wrong, acrid, damp, as if something inside you has spoiled. You wonder, in a detached, almost academic way, whether you might die. It wouldn't be a shock, not really. You've been waiting for something to happen for years, and this would be as tidy an ending as any. Sleep comes in fits. An hour here, 20 minutes there, always interrupted by shivers that begin in your spine and rattle your teeth. You close your eyes and see lights, swirling, pulsing shapes, patterns that seem halfway between embroidery and madness. Sometimes it's threads, sometimes eyes, sometimes a spinning wheel that turns with no spindle. When you open your eyes, the darkness is thicker, almost humming, crowded with things you cannot name. You consider calling for your husband, confessing everything in one desperate rush, but the thought of his confusion, the look of pity, or worse, of disappointment, is more unbearable than the silence. You decide it's better to say nothing. You are not addicted. You are simply managing your condition. The second day is worse, as these things always are. The cold inside you flares into a fever, and you sweat through the sheets, waking with your hair stuck to your face. The taste in your mouth is metallic, the basin beside you stained with another offering of bile. Time begins to slip and buckle. The light through the window seems to move too quickly, or perhaps not at all. You lose track. You cannot remember when you last stood up, when you last spoke aloud. The pain in your limbs grows diffuse, less like pain and more like a swarm of bees humming under your skin. You begin to see things. Insects, tiny and determined, crawl across the inside of your wrist. You brush them away, but your skin is smooth and empty. You do not scream. Not yet. You hear voices. Not words exactly, just the idea of voices. Your name, perhaps, or a man's laugh, or a woman whispering something urgent. You press your palms to your ears, but the sound only blooms, spreading inward, blooming like bruises behind your eyes. The mirror across the room catches your eye. You see yourself, but not quite. Your reflection tilts its head before you do, as if it is waiting for you to follow. You freeze, breath sharp in your throat. The air feels brittle, as if it might shatter. You blink, and everything snaps back to normal. You cross the room, turn the mirror to face the wall. You are not superstitious, but you do not want to see yourself again. You begin to sense something under the bed. You avoid looking. You don't need to see it. You can feel its weight, its presence, the pressure next to your ankles, waiting for you to dangle your feet over the edge. It breathes in slow, measured pulses, perfectly in time with your own. You tell yourself it is nothing, that it is only your mind playing tricks. But the reassurance only works when you keep your eyes away from the gap beneath the bed frame. At some point, you hear a sound, a scraping, metallic and harsh, followed by the soft, liquid rustle of silk on water. You sit up too quickly, and the room doubles, your head throbbing. You crawl to the edge of the bed, gripping the post so hard your knuckles ache. You look down. Nothing. You laugh, a brittle, cracked sound, halfway between relief and surrender. You slide back onto the pillows and try to drink the glass of water at your side. Most of it dribbles down your chin, soaking the collar of your nightdress. You reach for your handkerchief and knock something from the nightstand. The sharp crash tells you it was a teacup, and you stare at the shards scattered across the floor, unable to muster the energy to care. You watch until your vision blurs. That night, the dreams return, sharper than ever. They do not feel like dreams. Your fingers sink into sheets that dissolve into river mud. Your mouth fills with pins, and you hear your mother's voice calling from a hall that no longer exists. You wake suddenly, throat raw, unsure whether you screamed aloud or only in your mind. Morning brings a faint sense that perhaps the worst has passed. The fever has broken. Your hands are steadier, your eyes less prone to jitter when you try to read. You sit up, blinking at the dull grey of the sky. For a moment, you allow yourself to feel triumphant. You have survived. You are through the worst. Then the light shifts, just a fraction, and you see it. Something in the corner, or near the mirror, or crouched just beyond the threshold. You do not remember its shape, only the way it makes you feel, watched, as if your name is being peeled from your skin, as if time itself has abandoned you in a room that is no longer quite yours. You scream, once, twice, until your voice cracks and goes hoarse. Footsteps thunder in the corridor, doors open, the maid's voice calls your name, then silence. Whatever it was, it vanishes. You lie back, shivering, and reach for the bottle. Only a few drops remain. You uncork it with trembling hands and tip it into your mouth, forcing yourself to swallow, despite the scorched, bitter taste. It is not enough, not nearly. You cry quietly, as one does when no one is coming, letting the tears slip sideways across the pillow. You close your eyes and wait for the trembling to subside. It does not. So you reach for the bottle again, scraping the inside with a spoon, determined to find one last measure of comfort. But the days are starting to unravel. Even as you lie there, you can feel the edges of time beginning to blur, slipping away from you. The descent has only just begun, and soon the days will lose their edges. Time dissolves into a smudge that drifts somewhere between dusk and dawn. You could try to pinpoint the beginning of this unraveling, but the line is so blurred, so faint, it's as if it never existed at all. There is no last moment of clarity, no final thought before the fog. There's only the slow, persistent leaking away of yourself, like tea from a cracked cup on a cold afternoon in Georgian London. The mirror is no help at all. Sometimes, when you dare to lift your head, you catch the face of a stranger peering back. On odd mornings, she quirks her lips in a smile you do not feel. Other times, she scowls, her eyes too dark, her mouth moving a fraction of a second before yours. You try to catch her out, but she always wins. Eventually, you give up and avoid the mirror altogether. Mirrors are for the living, after all, and you are simply managing your condition. Beneath the covers, you inhabit a curious state, neither truly sleeping nor awake, hovering somewhere in between, a ghost haunting your own skin. Your limbs have grown stiff and cold, as if they belong to someone else entirely. Your fingers twitch, eager to write, to reach for something, but the effort is too great. You once tried to pen a letter, something apologetic, perhaps a plea or a confession, but the pen would not obey. The words slipped and skittered, refusing to stay in place. You managed a few crooked lines, half-formed, half-spelled, and then lost the thread. Maybe you tore it up. Maybe it's still lurking in the folds of your petticoats, or pressed beneath the night-soiled pail, stained with ink and something darker. You can't say for certain. Certainty is a luxury you no longer afford. Meals are distant events, not dictated by hunger, but by someone else's schedule. You eat only when a hand places food in yours. Sometimes you chew. Sometimes you simply let it rest on your tongue until it dissolves, tasteless and soft. You tried to drink from the ewer once and missed your mouth entirely, spilling water down your front. You sat in the damp for hours before you even noticed the chill. The sensation seemed to belong to someone else. The maid, once a brisk and bustling presence, now hovers at the periphery. She avoids your door as if it's grown nettles. Trays appear at odd angles, never accompanied by a knock. You hear her footsteps pause outside, then retreat. Once she opened the door just enough to peer inside, inhaled sharply, and shut it again. You tried to speak, to thank her, or ask for something, anything, but the words never made it to your lips. Or perhaps you simply forgot what you meant to say. Communication is slippery. Silence is so much more reliable. Your husband, ever the model of Georgian reserve, has reduced his vocabulary to a handful of phrases grunted from the hallway. His footsteps echo along the corridor, always followed by the creak of the stairs as he escapes. He leaves your allowance now on the mantelpiece, folded and impersonal. There was a time, you think, when he pressed it into your hand, maybe even brushed your knuckles with his thumb. Now, he does not enter the room. Sometimes you have trouble remembering his name, but it hardly matters. Names are slippery things, and you are simply exhausted. The scent of the room has changed. There is the expected sourness of linen and the sharp tang of spilled laudanum tincture, but something else has crept in. It's an earthy note, humid and heavy, like the stone floor of a crypt after rain. You open the window twice, maybe more. Each time you forget and close it again. The air inside presses in, heavy and damp, clinging to your skin like a fevered breath. People come and go, though you're not always sure they're real. Sometimes you spot them at the end of your bed, silent, watchful figures who do not speak. Other times they stand by the window, gazing out, as if expecting a carriage that never arrives. One wore your mother's shawl, another, unsettlingly, had your own face. You once spent nearly an hour conversing with one of them before realizing she hadn't blinked at all. These visitations have become a kind of company, more faithful than your family. You made an attempt once to leave the confines of your room. You pulled your cloak over your nightdress, laced boots with shaking hands, and made it as far as the staircase. Your knees buckled, your breath stuttered. You crawled 2 steps down, then simply stopped. You waited there, time again, becoming meaningless, until the maid discovered you, limp and awkward as a forgotten guest at the world's most tedious party. She said nothing, only dabbed at the blood on your lip with her apron and steered you back to bed. When you woke, or perhaps merely changed position, you found yourself on the floor again, a dull ache in your shoulder and a bruise you could not remember earning. Had the furniture moved, or had you? The mirror now bore a single jagged crack from corner to corner, like a fault line across your forgotten face. You were not surprised. When sleep comes, it brings a crowd. Your dreams are thick with faces pressing close, mouths forming words you cannot hear. Sometimes they whisper, sometimes they scream. You woke one night choking on your own fist, another time to find your fingernails torn, bleeding in crescent moons across your palm. The bedsheet smelled faintly metallic, streaked with rust. You wonder if this is simply the natural course of laudanum addiction, or if you are inventing new symptoms out of sheer boredom. The bottle, you notice, remains perpetually empty, no matter how many times you swear you've bought another. It's as if the liquid evaporates in the night, or the bottle simply refills itself with nothing at all. You have long since stopped measuring doses. You pour whatever remains and hope for the best. The careful rituals of rationing and pretending you can stop, those belong to some other, more responsible version of yourself. You are simply managing your condition. You are not addicted. You are exhausted. Your skin feels foreign, as if it has been fitted badly onto your bones. Some patches are too loose, others stretched too tight. You scratch at your arms and thighs until you raise welts, pale and angry. The backs of your hands are veined and papery. You don't remember when they started to look that way. You stop looking at them. You stop looking at anything, really. You try to remember your sister's face, but all you can conjure is a vague impression of hair, the color of tea leaves. You attempt to recall your wedding night, but instead you see only a crushed linen sheet. You reach for the comfort of a psalm, but the words trail off before the end. You forget how to read a clock. You ask the mirror what day it is and laugh at the sound of your own voice, hollow and echoing. From beneath the floorboards, you begin to hear music, a single violin, always slightly out of tune, weaving a mournful line through your days and nights. Footsteps follow, then silence. You hold your breath, but the sound persists, curling around your ears, whether you want it to or not. It's worse when the house is at its quietest. You press your head against the mattress, waiting for the music to fade, but it never does. Some days, you don't move at all. You wake in the same position. You fell asleep, limbs heavy as logs, eyes fixed on the cracked ceiling. You count the lines in the plaster, blinking slowly, as if each breath is a careful, deliberate act. You wonder, with a flicker of curiosity, if perhaps you've already died, and no one has bothered to mention it. You consider asking, but decide against it. It seems impolite. The letter you once tried to write is gone. You assume you discarded it. You assume you meant well. The whispering returns more frequently now, a voice just behind your thoughts. Sometimes it says your name. Sometimes it repeats things you once said, as if rehearsing a role. It sounds almost like you. Once it asked you to open the door. You replied that you couldn't. Not because it was locked, but because you weren't sure the door was there at all. You stopped caring who might see you. You no longer bother with curtains or fresh clothing. The basin sits full and neglected. The chamber pot has seen better days. A moth has taken up residence in the folds of your bedsheet. You tried to catch it once, but forgot what you were doing halfway through. Then a knock. Distinctly not the maid, nor your husband. Heavier, more insistent. Boots, you think, echoing on the floorboards. 2 knocks, and then the door swings open without so much as a by your leave. You do not lift your head. You do not speak. Your mouth is sluggish, your jaw trembling, your body cold with sweat. One arm is pinned beneath you, the other curled against your chest like a wilted flower. A man's voice cuts the silence. She's here. Another voice, nasal and impatient, chimes in. We thought she'd gone already. You want to ask who they are, what they mean, but your tongue is thick and uncooperative. The words will not come. You blink, trying to focus, but the light shifts, slanting across the room in a way that makes everything look wrong. One of them steps closer. He leans over, close enough for you to see the shadow of stubble on his chin. He smells of pipe smoke and damp wool. You feel his touch on your wrist, brief and clinical. He pulls back, frowning. Still warm, he says. Barely. You try to summon the strength to speak, to assure them that you're awake, that you understand, that you are still here. But the boundary between sleep and waking dissolves, and you close your eyes against the glare. Just for a moment. Just until the voices stop. Just until the trembling recedes. Somewhere beyond the door, you sense that decisions are being made, about you, without you. The air in the room thickens, pressing against your chest. You drift, suspended, waiting for the next intrusion, the next set of hands to guide you somewhere else. You wonder, distantly, if this is what it means to disappear. And then, as the footsteps recede, and the voices fade into the hush of the house, you sense, almost with relief, that change is coming. Not a rescue, not a return, but a removal. The end of autonomy, whispered in the shuffle of boots and the silence that follows. Your husband decides you shouldn't be here anymore. He reaches this decision in the quietest possible way. You are not present for the moment itself, but you are close enough to hear the gentle hum of voices from the next room, their words muffled by distance and decorum. You sit by the window, shawl wrapped close around your shoulders, eyes drifting over the grey sky and the restless wind pushing at the shutters. There is a certain rhythm to their conversation, the careful, deliberate cadence of two men agreeing on the shape of your future without ever truly naming it. Kindness, necessity, and firmness are all implied, never quite spoken. You recognize the ritual. You are not invited to participate. You do not interrupt. You simply exist in the soft periphery, the unspoken subject of a civil negotiation. No one comes to ask you what you think. No one sits beside you and takes your hand in theirs. You are reduced, just for this moment, to a set of symptoms, a list of behaviors, a recurring complaint. You are the dough being pressed gently but efficiently into the proper mold, for your own good, of course. Later, the doctor appears in the doorway, his features arranged into a mask of gentle neutrality. He pauses, as if weighing the most delicate of words, and finally rests a hand on your shoulder, just long enough to remind you he is there. We think, he begins, and you know already this is not your thought, that some time away would do you good. He uses phrases like recovery and rest, speaks of tranquility and proper care, as if serenity could be prescribed and bottled, as if rest is a thing you can be sent to fetch from a distant room. You nod, not because you agree, but because it is easier than protest. You find you no longer have the energy for protest. Your face offers its own response, some reflexive motion you don't quite recall making. The doctor's smile is brief, professional, and untroubled. He is satisfied with your compliance. The next morning, the maid moves quietly through your room, folding and packing while you rest your eyes, or at least pretend to. You hear the subtle scrape of drawers, the faint crinkle of linen being folded, the quiet collection of hairpins and brooches, as if the past few months of your life can be tidied away in a single morning. No one asks about the bottle. It has vanished. You cannot remember when you last saw it, yesterday perhaps, or the day before. You have learned not to ask questions about such things. Your mouth is dry, your words thick and distant, as if spoken through water. When you finally open your eyes, you find your dresses folded with military precision, your nightgown, the last stubborn remnant of the life you inhabited. Out in the hallway, someone whispers, the maid replying with a silence so soft it seems to swallow the sound whole. You recognize your new status. You are no longer a woman consulted or considered. You are a problem to be managed, a delicate object to be handled with care, but not with attention. That afternoon, the world outside your window grows damp and grey. The cab arrives with a hollow clatter, hooves striking wet stone with mechanical indifference. You hear the driver's footsteps, the slow, reluctant groan of the brake. Someone helps you into your coat. You do not recall who. Gloves are pressed into your hands. They are not your favorite pair, but they are clean, suitable, appropriate for a journey you did not choose. Your husband waits in the front hall, posture rigid, face a mask of bland civility. He offers his arm, neither firmly nor gently, but with just enough pressure to guide you safely down the steps and into the waiting cab. The air is thick with a kind of unspoken farewell. He does not follow you inside. "I'll come at the weekend," he murmurs, and then, as if correcting a misstep, "I'll write first." You nod, because that is the only gesture expected of you. The door closes, the latch clicks, and with that, the ritual is complete. The driver does not meet your gaze. He returns to his seat, gathers the reins, and the cab lurches forward into the late afternoon fog. You watch the familiar silhouette of your home recede behind the glass, the edges of the world blurring, dissolving into a shapeless grey. Even the shutters, always rattling, now fall silent. It is as if you have already been replaced, or, perhaps, as if you were never truly present to begin with. Your hands fold themselves in your lap, uncertain what to do now that there is nothing left to hold. The reflection in the window is a pale, shifting thing, a ghost inhabiting another person's dream. London drifts by in slow motion, a bakery with its door ajar, a canal reflecting the sky's dull silver, a dog barking at a child in the distance. The details fade almost as soon as you notice them. You try, out of habit, to count the turns, the chimneys, the familiar shops, but each becomes indistinguishable from the last. The city is a soft grey blur, and you are carried along as quietly as a letter already posted. Eventually, the cab slows on a street that means nothing to you. The buildings are square and grim, their surfaces scrubbed of any hint of comfort. The trees in their little yards are bare, their branches reaching up like desperate hands. There are no welcoming signs, no friendly faces at the gate, only a tall wall, a closed gate, and a man waiting with his hat in his hands. The driver exchanges a few words with him, low, businesslike, and the gate swings open on silent hinges. You pass through without ceremony. The building ahead is larger than you anticipated, not elegant, but undeniably imposing. Ivy clings to its stone, stripped of leaves, as if it too is enduring the winter in silent resignation. Iron grates shield the lower windows, not quite bars, but not exactly not bars either. The message is clear. Disturbances are discouraged. The boundary between inside and out is maintained with polite efficiency. A nurse emerges before the cab has even come to a halt. She is dressed in grey, her hair neatly contained, hands folded with practiced composure. Her smile is gentle, the kind reserved for children sent away to school, or for guests who have overstayed their welcome. "Mrs. L," she says, and you realize she is addressing you. You nod, your mind searching for the right response and finding none. She offers her hand, but only takes yours if you extend it first. You do not. She waits a heartbeat, then adjusts her apron and gestures for you to come inside. The air in the entryway is thick with the scent of damp wool and lavender, a mixture that manages to be both soothing and faintly oppressive. The floors are polished to a dull sheen. The light is soft, filtered through heavy curtains, so that nothing feels harsh or intrusive. In a side room, a fire flickers, barely warming the edges of the space. You catch a glimpse of another woman in a padded chair, eyes fixed on the flames, her hands folded in her lap, like a sculpture abandoned by its maker. A nurse leans in to whisper something in her ear, and she blinks slowly, as if surfacing from a deep and dreamless sleep. She is not startled. She is merely present. Or perhaps not even that. Your own room is small, reassuringly neat, and almost aggressively clean. The windows are set high, the curtains pale and unassuming. The bed is narrow, legs turned and polished, linen crisp and cold to the touch. Above it hangs a pastoral painting, sheep grazing beneath a sky of improbable blue. Your trunk sits at the foot of the bed, already in place. You do not remember seeing anyone carry it, but here it is, another part of your life quietly relocated without your consent. The nurse tells you that tea will be served in an hour. She mentions the physician, who will visit soon to discuss your regimen and recovery. She assures you that someone will sit with you for the first few nights, just to help you settle in. You nod, collecting these details in some forgotten corner of your mind, unsure whether you will remember them by evening. The nurse's smile reappears, unchanged and unchanging, and she withdraws, closing the door with a delicacy that borders on reverence. You are left alone. The quiet is total, broken only by the tick of the clock on the mantel and the faint, intermittent sigh of wind against the eaves. For the first time in weeks, perhaps months, there is no movement, no rustling of skirts, no distant voices, no boots on the stairs. You sit gingerly on the edge of the bed, hands clasped tightly in your lap, and stare at them as if waiting for instruction. They look unfamiliar, a stranger's hands, pale and uncertain. Your name, you remind yourself, still belongs to you, but you cannot recall the last time it was spoken with tenderness. You lie back on the blanket, still dressed, feeling the weight of starch and unfamiliar fabric settle over you. There is a vase beside the bed, a single white flower arranged with care. Its petals are already beginning to brown at the edges, the first sign of an ending. You stare until the room blurs and your eyelids grow heavy. No one has locked the door, but it hardly matters. You could leave, but you do not. There is nowhere to go. You are simply managing your condition, after all. You are not addicted. You are exhausted. Soon, the house that once was yours will be just another address in another district, and your days will be measured by the ticking of the institutional clock. The flower will wither, the trunk will remain untouched, and so you wait, suspended between past and future, listening to the small, persistent sounds of your new world. The first week will pass in a blur of unfamiliar linens and hushed voices, but that, I promise you, is a story for another time. The first week slips past you, one soft-edged hour bleeding into the next, all beneath the gentle tyranny of unfamiliar sheets and the steady, muffled footsteps of strangers. They tell you this place is a rest home, a soothing phrase really, something respectable women of a certain standing might visit to recover from their nerves. Recovery, it seems, is a word that means many things, none of them quite clear. The nurse who explains this has a voice that could put you to sleep, even if you hadn't already been half-drowned for years. She's always looking just over your shoulder, as if the real you is standing behind, waiting to be let back in. You try, one afternoon, to ask how long you'll be here. The words slip from your tongue, float out into the hallway, and vanish, uncollected. Answers are not on offer, No one utters the word asylum. There's no need. The curtains in your room have been sewn closed, the stitches thick and practical, as if sunlight is something dangerous that ought to be contained. Time becomes a fog. You wake at odd intervals, sometimes to a pale square of light on the wall, sometimes to the deep blue hush that could be either night or very early morning. Meals appear on trays, then disappear, the clatter so soft you begin to wonder if the food is delivered by ghosts. Your bottle, the one with its comforting amber liquid, is missing. You ask for it, just once. The nurse's mouth pinches, her tone somewhere between maternal and quietly scolding. "That's not part of your new regimen," she says, and you nod, as if you've been caught attempting some small impropriety. You lie back down, obedient as any patient, and stare at the ceiling. The pattern of the tiles reminds you, unhelpfully, of bones. At first, you tell yourself this is only a temporary arrangement. Surely, soon, your husband will arrive. He will take your hand, apologize for the confusion, and you'll return to your rooms, grateful and perhaps a little embarrassed by your own melodrama. You ready yourself for this moment, rehearsing gratitude, practicing the proper way to thank him. You try to remember the names of neighbors, the topics of polite conversation, weather, church, the minor fortunes and misfortunes of acquaintances. You imagine what you'll say, how you'll say it, and you wait. But the days keep coming, soft and indistinguishable. No one visits. The hours lose their shape. The women around you are spectral, gentle creatures who occupy the corners of the ward, knitting projects forever paused at the same row, eyes glazed with something older than boredom. They drift through the gardens in slow, deliberate loops, books clutched to their chests, always opened to the same well-thumbed page. Some never speak. Others converse quietly with things no one else can see. At night you hear whispers, sometimes Latin, sometimes nursery rhyme, sometimes a string of sounds that never resolves into words. You find you do not speak much either. When you do, your own voice sounds borrowed, as though you've taken it from the nurse's handbook. "Yes, thank you. Just a little tired today." You do not ask about time. You do not count the days. Time folds itself into neat, featureless squares. Fashion changes on the ward, skirts shorten, fabrics grow plainer. The food becomes less careful. The handwriting on your chart grows hurried, as if the nurses are racing the hours themselves. One winter, a new girl arrives. Her hair is cropped close to the scalp, her wrists bound in fresh linen. She does not speak, not even when you offer gentle words. She gazes at your collar, searching for something she never finds. By spring, she's gone. You never hear her name. New nurses come and go. Some have crisp uniforms and brisk manners. Others seem too eager, their smiles stretched thin. One calls you by your first name, and it takes you several weeks to remember it. Belongs to you. There is talk, whispered and nervous, of electric treatments. You are not chosen. You are not chosen for much of anything these days. You have become one of the easy ones. You eat the food set before you, sleep when told, and cause no trouble. This is enough. You are simply managing your condition. Sometimes pain returns, not the sharp, insistent pain you remember from before, but a low ache that lingers in your joints, your stomach, your chest. It is never enough to scream about. The nurses bring warm compresses, a new tonic, a chalky lozenge that sticks to your teeth. You take them all because it is easier than refusing. They do not help, but you barely notice. Now and then, your room changes. They move you from the east corridor to the north. The view shifts. Fewer trees, more rooftops, and thin trails of smoke. The wallpaper is the same. A faded pattern of vines that never seem to bloom. Some winters you think you see snow out the window, but the glass is so clouded you cannot be sure. You avoid looking too long. The reflection makes your head ache. The face you see is a stranger's. On what you calculate must be your 35th birthday, a nurse brings a biscuit with a single candle. You blow it out. She applauds softly, as though for a child. You do not cry. Tears left you long ago. You have not worn proper shoes in years. You do not miss them. Your feet have grown soft. Your hands are rough with calluses from clutching coarse blankets and peeling strips of wallpaper, or from digging your nails into the wooden arms of the chair. Sometimes you try to hum a song you once loved. The melody falters halfway through. The tune unravels, and you finish in silence. No one seems to notice, or perhaps they simply do not care. Once someone calls your name, the old one, your maiden name, from somewhere down the corridor. Your heart leaps, wild and unfamiliar, but it's only a mistake. The girl they meant is gone by morning, her bed stripped and bare. Nurses begin writing their notes in red pencil rather than black. You notice this, an odd change, but you do not comment. A new doctor joins the rounds. He addresses you in the manner of a man speaking to a wall. He says you are stable, that you require continued rest. Your case is a matter of quiet maintenance. You nod. You have become easy to manage. You are not addicted. You are simply exhausted. Spring comes again, and your body, ever the obedient servant, finally betrays you. There is no grand drama, no final speech, no struggle. You slip quietly into a deeper sleep, one that does not lift. Once, you wake with a thirst so great you cannot move your arms to reach the water. You watch a patch of sunlight crawl across the wall. You think of nothing at all. It is peaceful, if empty. You die in your narrow bed on a Tuesday, a little after 2 in the morning. If the nurse's best guess is to be believed, she finds you an hour later, notes the time in her careful, unhurried hand, closes your eyes, and writes your name into the ledger before moving to the next ward. There is no funeral. The hospital follows a process. A carriage arrives the following afternoon, the driver silent and efficient. He does not ask who you were. He doesn't need to. With you travels a slip of paper bearing your name, your age, and the word exhaustion. No one argues with it. Your husband is notified. He receives the letter at his office, folds it with a practiced hand, and slips it into a drawer. He does not mention it at dinner. In 2 years he remarries, a quiet woman, the kind who does not ask too many questions. Your few belongings are packed into a wooden crate and stored in the shed behind the rest home. Most are thrown out the next year. No one remembers your voice. No one hums your favorite song. Your name appears on no plaque, no church register, no stone. You are survived only by a line in a ledger and a faint brown stain along the edge of a narrow bed. And so, we reach the end of tonight's story. Not a tale of triumph or healing, but of a woman quietly erased from her own life, until nothing is left but a name on a folded piece of paper and a memory that no one bothers to keep. If you found yourself drifting somewhere between sleep and waking, and you want more, boring history for sleep, or simply wish to join others wandering through the forgotten corridors of the past, you can like, subscribe, or add a comment with another overlooked chapter of history you'd like explored next. For those listening on a history podcast app, leaving a rating or review helps others discover these stories. And a special, gentle thank you to the supporters who make this series possible, especially our chroniclers, Andrew S. and Rich Davis. May you drift off with a sense of peace, and, unlike tonight's subject, may you always be remembered, at least here, among the insomniacs and night wanderers of history for sleep.